Kicked out at 15, my brother's lies ruined my life. My name is Jaden, and I am a 28-year-old man with a twin sister named Jenna. From as far back as I can remember, our upbringing was anything but equal. Growing up, my parents, Sarah and Marcus, seemed to have a strange obsession with Jenna. She was their golden child, their perfect daughter who could do no wrong. It wasn't just subtle favoritism either. It was blatant and obvious to anyone who spent any time around our family. While Jenna basked in their love and attention, I, on the other hand, was treated like an afterthought, always in the shadow of her glory. From an early age, my parents seemed convinced that Jenna was destined for greatness, and they made sure to remind me of that every chance they got. They showered her with praise for every little thing, even things that seemed trivial. Jenna got an A on her spelling test. My parents threw her a mini celebration. Meanwhile, I could have been scoring goals in a football match, receiving accolades at school, or even excelling in my hobbies, and all I'd get was a dismissive nod or worse, a lecture about why I wasn't more like Jenna. I wasn't interested in being Jenna. I didn't want to live in the bubble of perfection my parents had built around her. I loved playing sports, being outside, and socializing with my friends. Football and basketball were my outlets, the only places where I felt like I could be myself. But even those small joys were frowned upon by my parents, who saw no value in anything that wasn't academic. "Sports won't take you anywhere, Jaden," they'd say. "Why can't you be more focused like Jenna?" The constant comparison between us wore me down over time. It wasn't just the fact that they praised Jenna endlessly. It was that they seemed to enjoy pointing out my perceived flaws in contrast. I wasn't as studious as Jenna, and that to them meant I wasn't as valuable. The emotional distance between us widened with each passing year until it felt like I was a stranger in my own home. Jenna, to her credit, played the role of the beloved daughter well. She thrived in their praise and quickly learned that she could do no wrong in their eyes. But what hurt the most was that she never seemed to care about the difference in how we were treated. She never stood up for me or pointed out the unfairness. In fact, I think she enjoyed being the favored one. Birthdays were the worst. You'd think as twins, we'd have shared celebrations, but no. Each year, Jenna got a lavish birthday party with all her friends, sleepovers, and gifts that were way beyond what a typical teenager should get. My birthday was a mere afterthought. I wasn't even allowed to invite my friends over for my birthday party. One year, I remember my parents literally forgot to get me a cake. I had to sit in the corner of the room while they celebrated Jenna's big day as if I didn't exist. To this day, birthdays carry a sense of dread for me, not joy. The only person in my life who seemed to care about me, who treated me like I mattered, was my grandfather, James. He was my safe haven, my escape from the emotional neglected home. Every time he visited, he brought me little gifts, my favorite chocolates, books, or sometimes just a few dollars to spend on myself. It wasn't the gifts themselves that mattered. It was the way he made me feel seen. He talked to me like I was someone important, like I was worthy of attention. My grandfather was the only person in the family who didn't treat me like Jenna's less-than shadow, and for that, I loved him dearly. As the years passed, my parents' favoritism shifted from subtle to blatant emotional abuse. They ridiculed my interests, belittled my hobbies, and regularly reminded me that I was the problem child in their eyes. Jenna, meanwhile, had access to any extracurricular activity she wanted: debate clubs, student council, academic programs, you name it. I wasn't allowed to play sports because, according to them, it was a distraction. Every time I tried to assert myself or express my interests, I was shut down. "Why can't you just study like Jenna?" was a phrase I heard almost every day. Things took a dramatic turn during my sophomore year of high school. One afternoon, I got grounded for something incredibly trivial, having a Snapchat account. My parents had strict rules about who I could talk to and how I could communicate with my friends, and when they found out I had the app, they went ballistic. It wasn't just a typical punishment either. They tore apart my room, threw my things around, and took the door off its hinges, saying I didn't deserve privacy. It was an invasion of my space and my sense of security, and it left me feeling humiliated and powerless. Jenna, rather than supporting me or sympathizing, took the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. She started lying about me to my parents, accusing me of things I hadn't done, and shifting the blame for anything that went wrong in the house onto me. If money went missing, it was my fault. If something got broken, it was because of me. She knew that our parents would believe her without question, and she used that power to her advantage. This was how Jenna operated, manipulating the toxic environment my parents had created to her benefit. She started telling even bigger lies about me, and soon I became the target of rumors at school. Jenna would show up with bruises on her arms, and when people asked what happened, she'd tell them that I was physically abusive toward her. I was horrified when I found out. She even went as far as to hurt herself, punching her own arms or giving herself a black eye, just to make her lies more convincing. The rumors spread like wildfire. Soon I was isolated, ostracized by people who had once been my friends. Even my closest friends started to doubt me, and I had no idea how to stop it. The emotional toll was unbearable, and the worst part was that there was no one to turn to, not even my parents, who believed every word Jenna said. The rumors grow. I never fully understood why Jenna hated me so much. Was it jealousy? Resentment? Perhaps she felt threatened by the fact that, unlike her, I had no trouble making friends at school. I was outgoing and sociable, while Jenna was awkward around people. My ability to connect with others might have made her feel inferior, and maybe that was her motivation for turning my life into a living nightmare. One event stands out as a turning point in our relationship. On our 14th birthday, something unexpected happened. None of Jenna's friends showed up to her extravagant birthday party, leaving her visibly upset. Meanwhile, my friends, despite not being allowed to come to the party, took me out for ice cream after school. I had a great time, and I think that's what pushed Jenna over the edge. That night, she was seething with anger, and the next day, things got worse. Jenna's campaign against me escalated quickly after that birthday. She became more determined to ruin my reputation, and her lies grew darker and more destructive. At first, it was small, petty lies, telling our parents that I'd been sneaking out at night or that I'd been hanging out with the wrong crowd. But soon, the lies turned into accusations of physical abuse. Jenna would show up to school with bruises on her arms, telling anyone who would listen that I had hit her. She'd fabricate stories about me being violent and dangerous, and horrifyingly, people believed her. I still remember the day when my best friend Aaron pulled me aside to tell me what Jenna had been saying. He looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet as he struggled to bring up the subject. "Dude, people are saying some messed up stuff about you," he said. "Jenna's been telling everyone that you've been hitting her." At first, I couldn't believe it. I had never laid a hand on my sister, and the thought that she would go so far as to lie about something like that left me speechless. I tried to laugh it off, assuming it was some sick joke, but Aaron's expression remained serious. "She's showing people bruises, Jaden. People are starting to believe her." I felt a cold knot of dread form in the pit of my stomach. The rumors Jenna was spreading weren't just damaging, they were dangerous. I could feel my life crumbling around me as people started to treat me like I was guilty of the things Jenna accused me of. Friends became distant, people stopped inviting me to hang out, and even teachers looked at me with suspicion. It was like a dark cloud had settled over my life, and no matter how much I tried to explain that none of it was true, no one wanted to listen. I confronted Jenna one afternoon, cornering her in the hallway after school. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling with frustration and hurt. "Why are you lying about me?" She looked up at me with a smirk, as if she found the whole situation amusing. "Because you deserve it," she said simply. "You've always thought you were better than me, and now people are finally seeing the real you." Her words stung like a slap in the face. I had never thought I was better than her. In fact, I'd spent most of my life feeling inferior. Jenna's manipulation was like a web that I couldn't escape, and no matter what I did, she always seemed to be one step ahead, pulling the strings and watching as my world fell apart. Things reached their breaking point when the rumors caught the attention of the school administration. One morning, I was called into the principal's office where I found Jenna and my parents already waiting. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. This wasn't just a rumor anymore. This was a full-blown accusation, and I had no idea how to defend myself against it. The principal, a stern woman named Mrs. Henderson, looked at me with disappointment as she began to recount the allegations against me. "Jaden, your sister has come to us with some very serious claims," she said. "She says that you've been physically abusing her at home." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "That's not true." I protested, my voice cracking with desperation. I've never laid a hand on her. But no one seemed to believe me, not the principal, not my parents, and certainly not Jenna, who sat there with tears streaming down her face, playing the victim to perfection. My father, his face twisted with anger, leaned forward in his chair. "How could you do this to your sister?" he spat. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, had already made up their minds. They didn't care about the truth, they only cared about protecting Jenna. The principal suspended me for 10 days, citing the school's zero-tolerance policy for bullying and violence. As I sat there in shock, I realized that my life as I knew it was over. Jenna had won. She had destroyed my reputation, turned my friends against me, and now even my own family didn't believe me. When we got home, things went from bad to worse. My father, still fuming from the meeting with the principal, stormed into my room and began packing my belongings. "You can't live here anymore," he said coldly. "Not after what you've done to your sister." I begged him to listen to me, to understand that none of it was true, but he wouldn't hear it. My mother stood by, clutching Jenna to her chest as she cried, offering her no comfort to me at all. Eventually, my father called my grandfather to come and pick me up. "He can't stay here," he said over the phone, his voice filled with finality. "He's not welcome in this house anymore." As I stood there in the foyer, surrounded by my hastily packed bags, I felt like my entire world had crumbled beneath me. My own family had cast me out, all because of a web of lies that Jenna had spun. When my grandfather arrived, he argued with my parents, but it was clear that their minds were made up. They didn't want me anymore. My grandfather took me in without hesitation, and as we drove away from the only home I had ever known, I couldn't help but wonder how things had gotten so bad. How had my life been torn apart so completely, and all because of the hatred of my own sister? Starting over. Living with my grandfather was both a relief and a painful reminder of what I had lost. On one hand, I no longer had to endure the daily torment of being in a house where I was unloved and unwanted. On the other hand, the emotional wounds from being abandoned by my parents were too fresh, too deep to ignore. For weeks, I couldn't bring myself to do anything. I stayed in my room, barely eating, barely sleeping. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was alone in the world. My parents had kicked me out, my sister had destroyed my reputation, and the people who had once been my friends had turned their backs on me. I felt like I had nothing left. My grandfather, bless him, tried his best to comfort me. He would come into my room, sit on the edge of my bed, and tell me stories from his own youth, stories about overcoming hardships, about standing up to bullies, about finding strength in the face of adversity. He was my rock during those dark days, the only person who believed in me when no one else did. "Jaden," he would say, his voice gentle but firm, "you're not the bad person they've made you out to be. You've done nothing wrong. And one day the truth will come out. But until then, you need to focus on yourself. You can't let them destroy your spirit." His words were a lifeline, but it was still hard to pull myself out of the hole I had fallen into. When the 10-day suspension ended, I returned to school, but everything had changed. The rumors about me were still circulating, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore them, they clung to me like a dark shadow. I became a loner, keeping to myself as much as possible. There was no point in trying to explain my side of the story. No one wanted to hear it. I was guilty in their eyes, and that was that. Even the teachers looked at me differently. I could see the doubt in their eyes, the way they hesitated to interact with me. It was as if Jenna's lies had infected every corner of my life, leaving no room for me to breathe. Every day felt like a battle just to get through without breaking down. The only thing that kept me going was my grandfather. He was always there, reminding me that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't worthless, that I had a future beyond the walls of my high school. He encouraged me to focus on my studies, to put all my energy into graduating and getting out of that toxic environment. And so, that's what I did. By the time I graduated, I was more than ready to leave my past behind. I applied to colleges far away from home, hoping that a change of scenery would give me the fresh start I so desperately needed. My grandfather supported me every step of the way, helping me with applications, writing recommendation letters, and even driving me to campus visits. When I finally got accepted into a college that was hundreds of miles away from my hometown, I felt like I had been given a second chance at life. For the first time, I could escape Jenna, my parents, and the lies that had defined my teenage years. I could start over in a place where no one knew me, where no one had any preconceived notions about who I was. A new beginning. College was everything I had hoped for and more. It was a fresh start, a clean slate, and I embraced it with open arms. No one knew about the drama with my family. No one had heard the rumors that had plagued my high school years, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove to myself, and to the world, that I was more than the sum of Jenna's lies. I had always been interested in writing, and college gave me the opportunity to explore that passion more fully. I started writing for the school newspaper, covering everything from campus events to opinion pieces on current issues. Writing became my outlet, my way of processing everything that had happened to me. But it wasn't just academic success that I found in college. I'd also made friends, real friends, who liked me for who I was and didn't judge me based on false rumors. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was just Jaden, a guy trying to make his way through college like everyone else. I even found a new passion, content writing. It started as a side gig, something I did to make a little extra money while I was in school. I would write blog posts, website content, and social media posts for small businesses. At first, it was just a way to pay for textbooks and groceries, but as I built up a portfolio, I started landing bigger clients. Before I knew it, I was making enough money to support myself without having to rely on my parents or anyone else. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. I was doing well in school, building a career, and most importantly, I was happy. I didn't need my parents' approval, and I certainly didn't need Jenna's validation. I was carving out a life for myself, one that was free from the toxicity of my past. A turn of events. Life after college was even better than I had imagined. My content writing career took off, and I found myself working with major brands, traveling as a digital nomad, and building a name for myself in the industry. I had clients from all over the world, and the freedom that came with being able to work from anywhere was exhilarating. I had also managed to save up enough money to live comfortably, something I never thought I'd be able to do so early in my career. For the first time, I felt truly independent, financially, emotionally, and mentally. I had escaped the prison of my past, and I was thriving. My relationship with my grandfather remained strong throughout it all. We talked on the phone regularly, and I visited him whenever I could. He was my anchor, the one person who had never given up on me, and I made sure to let him know how much I appreciated him. He was proud of me, and that meant the world to me. But even though I had moved on, the past wasn't quite done with me. One day, out of the blue, I received an invitation from my old high school principal. Mrs. Henderson, the same principal who had suspended me all those years ago, had seen some of my work online and wanted me to speak at a seminar for students. She thought my success story could inspire them. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back. The idea of returning to the place where I had been so deeply hurt made my stomach turn. But after thinking it over, I realized that this was an opportunity to reclaim my narrative. I wasn't the same kid who had been kicked out of his own home, falsely accused of things he hadn't done. I was a successful, confident adult, and maybe it was time to show the people at my old school just how far I had come. The seminar was a success. I shared my journey with the students, talking about the importance of resilience, self-worth, and pursuing your passions, no matter what obstacles stand in your way. Clips from my speech were posted online, and they quickly went viral. It wasn't long before I was being invited to speak at other events, and even on local TV shows, about my career and the lessons I had learned along the way. I was proud of what I had accomplished, and I shared the clips from my speech on my social media accounts. That's when everything changed. The ultimatum. It started with a few congratulatory messages from old acquaintances, people I hadn't heard from in years. And then, out of nowhere, my phone started buzzing with calls and texts from my parents. I hadn't spoken to them since the day they kicked me out of the house. For years, they had been completely silent, ignoring me as if I didn't exist. And now, suddenly, they were reaching out. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I ignored the first few calls, too confused and conflicted to answer. But when the missed calls piled up, 6 in total, all from my father, I knew I couldn't avoid them forever. So reluctantly, I called him back. My father answered on the first ring, his voice uncharacteristically cheerful. "Jaden, it's been so long. How are you, son?" He sounded like we hadn't been estranged for nearly a decade. I could hear my mother in the background, her voice equally upbeat, asking about my life and how I'd been. It was surreal. These were the same people who had thrown me out of their lives without a second thought, and now they were acting like nothing had happened. But as the conversation progressed, their true intentions became clear. After a few minutes of small talk, my father casually asked, "So, how much are you making these days?" I was taken aback. "Why does that matter?" I asked, my suspicion growing. "Well, your mother and I have been having some financial difficulties lately. The house needs a lot of repairs, and we were wondering if you could help us out." There it was. They didn't care about me. They cared about my success, about what I could do for them now that I was financially stable. The audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. "You've got to be kidding me," I finally said, my voice shaking with anger. "You kicked me out of the house, abandoned me, and now you're asking for money." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother spoke, her voice soft and pleading. "Jaden, we're your parents. It's your responsibility to help us now. We raised you, didn't we?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of her words. Raised me? They hadn't raised me, my grandfather had. They had cast me aside like I was nothing, and now they were trying to guilt me into helping them. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again, but instead of hanging up, I decided to make them an offer they couldn't accept. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "I'll help you on one condition." There was a pause, and then my father, clearly intrigued, asked, "What's the condition?" I took a deep breath. "You need to publicly admit that Jenna lied about everything. You need to tell our family and friends that she made up all the rumors about me and that you wrongfully believed her." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. After a long pause, my father finally spoke, his voice tight with anger. "That's not necessary, Jaden. We don't need to involve other people in this." I wasn't backing down. "That's the only way I'll help you. You humiliated me in front of everyone because of Jenna's lies. Now, you need to take accountability and set the record straight. If you can't do that, don't expect a single penny from me." My mother tried to reason with me, telling me that it was all in the past and that I needed to let it go. But I wasn't about to let them sweep it under the rug. They had hurt me deeply, and if they wanted my help, they needed to acknowledge the pain they had caused. The conversation ended with my father angrily telling me that I was being unreasonable and selfish, but I didn't care. I wasn't the same kid who had been manipulated and controlled by them. I had the power now, and I wasn't going to let them use me. Jenna's true colors. A few days after the ultimatum, I received a message from Jenna. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and honestly, I hadn't expected to hear from her at all. But there it was, an unread message from the person who had caused so much chaos in my life. Part of me didn't want to open it. I didn't want to deal with whatever nonsense she had to say. But curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the message. It was worse than I had imagined. "Hey, bro," she wrote, her words dripping with sarcasm. "I heard about your little ultimatum. Seriously? You think Mom and Dad are going to choose you over me? You're delusional. They've always loved me more, and they always will. Yeah, I lied about you all those years ago. So what? It's in the past. You're still holding on to that? Pathetic. You're almost 30 years old, Jaden, and you're still hung up on high school drama. Get over it. You're unmarried, childless, and living in your own little world. The least you could do is help out Mom and Dad after everything they've done for you. Grow up and stop being so selfish." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The sheer arrogance, the entitlement, the complete lack of remorse. It was like Jenna hadn't changed at all. She was still the same manipulative, spiteful person she had always been, and she clearly had no intention of taking responsibility for the damage she had caused. But her message did something else. It solidified my resolve. If my parents weren't willing to set the record straight, then I would. I couldn't let Jenna continue to manipulate and control the narrative of my life. It was time to take matters into my own hands. exposing the truth. Fueled by a sense of righteous anger, I decided that it was time to tell the truth. I sat down at my computer and began drafting an email to my extended family, everyone who had been part of our lives during the years Jenna's lies had destroyed mine. I wrote about everything: the emotional abuse, the lies, the false accusations, and how my parents had chosen to believe Jenna over me without question. I didn't hold back. I described in detail how Jenna had physically hurt herself to make it look like I had been abusive, and how my parents had kicked me out of the house without ever giving me a chance to defend myself. I explained how I had been forced to live with my grandfather, and how, despite everything, I had managed to build a successful career for myself. Most importantly, I attached a screenshot of Jenna's message, the one where she admitted to lying about me all those years ago. I wanted everyone to see the kind of person she really was. It wasn't about revenge. I wasn't doing this to hurt Jenna or my parents. I was doing it because I needed to clear my name. For years, I had been painted as the villain, and it was time for the truth to come out. After making sure the email was as clear and detailed as possible, I hit send. The response was immediate. The aftermath. The days following my email were chaotic, to say the least. My phone lit up with messages from relatives, some offering apologies, others accusing me of stirring up unnecessary drama. It was clear that my email had shaken things up in the family, and while some people were willing to listen to my side of the story, others weren't so quick to change their opinions. A few of my aunts and uncles reached out, telling me they had no idea how bad things had been for me. They offered their support and expressed regret for not realizing what was going on. Others, however, were less sympathetic. They accused me of trying to destroy the family, of being vindictive and spiteful for dragging up old issues. My parents, of course, were furious. They bombarded me with texts and calls, accusing me of ruining their reputation and making them look bad in front of the rest of the family. My father left a particularly nasty voicemail, telling me that I was ungrateful and that I had ruined everything. Jenna also sent a string of abusive messages, trying to defend herself and calling me a liar. But I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I contacted a lawyer and had a cease and desist letter sent to both my parents and Jenna. The letter made it clear that if they continued to harass me, I would take legal action. I wasn't going to let them bully me into silence anymore. To my relief, the cease and desist letter worked. My parents and Jenna stopped contacting me altogether, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The truth was out there, and I had finally reclaimed control over my own story. Moving forward, it's been a few months since I sent that email, and life has finally settled down. My content writing career continues to flourish, and I've been invited to speak at more seminars and podcasts. I've even started mentoring young writers who are just starting out in the industry. It feels good to be in a position where I can give back and help others find their voice. The most important relationship in my life remains the one with my grandfather. He stood by me through everything, and we've grown even closer in recent months. I visit him every week, and we spend hours talking about life, work, and his new hobby, gardening. Those afternoons in his garden have become the highlight of my week, a peaceful escape from the chaos of the past. I've also started going to therapy, something I should have done a long time ago. Talking to a therapist has helped me work through the emotional scars left by my family and begin the process of healing. It hasn't been easy, but I'm learning to let go of the anger and pain that I've carried for so long. I'm learning to forgive, not for their sake, but for mine. As for my parents and Jenna, they've stayed out of my life since the cease and desist letter, and I'm happy to keep it that way. I don't need their approval or their love anymore. I've built a life that I'm proud of, and I've surrounded myself with people who care about me for who I am, not for who they want me to be. The last word. Looking back on everything that's happened, I realize that my family's betrayal was one of the hardest things I've ever had to endure. But it also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, about self-worth, and about the importance of standing up for yourself no matter what. Jenna may have tried to destroy my reputation, but in the end, the truth came out. My parents may have abandoned me, but my grandfather was there to pick up the pieces. And now I've created a life that is entirely my own, free from the toxic influence of people who never truly cared about me. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace with the past. My story is no longer defined by the lies that Jenna spread or the neglect of my parents. It's defined by my strength, my perseverance, and the love and support of the one person who never gave up on me, my grandfather. And in the end, that's all that really matters.